In a distant city, nestled between towering mountains and endless plains, lived a man named Thomas. His home was a small, worn-out house on the outskirts, far from the hustle and bustle of the city's core. The city's tall skyscrapers and neon lights never reached him, leaving his world in shades of gray and solitude. He had no friends, no family to visit him. Every day was a quiet struggle, yet he never complained. His life was a constant cycle of work, silence, and quiet resignation. But underneath the surface, Thomas had always felt something more within him, something hidden, waiting to awaken. At the factory where he worked, Thomas was the invisible man. He performed his tasks with precision, but his work was largely ignored by his coworkers. The tasks he completed were simple, repetitive, and essential, yet no one acknowledged him. The younger, more vibrant employees often sneered at him, viewing him as a relic of a time long past. His plain clothes and tired eyes painted him as weak and insignificant in their eyes. Day after day, he was the target of whispered jokes and mockery, but Thomas never responded. He wore the label of invisible like a shield, his silence a defense against the cruelty he endured. One evening, after another long and tiresome day of scorn and loneliness, Thomas decided to break from his usual routine. He needed to escape the confines of his small world, even if only for a little while. With no destination in mind, he simply wandered the streets of the city. The night air was cool, and the emptiness of the streets somehow comforted him. As he walked, he found himself standing in front of a small, forgotten bookstore, its windows obscured by dust and age. Something about it called to him. He pushed open the creaky door, and the smell of old paper and leather filled the air. The store was dimly lit, and its shelves were cluttered with books that seemed lost to time. The walls were lined with stories waiting to be discovered, but most were buried beneath the weight of dust. Yet amidst this decay, something caught his eye. A leather-bound book with golden lettering that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The title, The Hidden Empire, intrigued him. Curiosity tugged at him, and without thinking, Thomas picked up the book and opened it. The pages felt smooth under his fingers, and as he scanned the first few lines, he was immediately drawn into its words. It spoke of power, secrets, and empires built in the shadows. But it was one passage that truly caught his attention. True power is not revealed in the light. Those who master the shadows can shape the fate of others without ever being seen. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a stirring in his soul. The words resonated with him in a way that nothing ever had before. It was as though the book had been written specifically for him. He bought it, leaving the bookstore with a newfound sense of purpose, though he could not yet fully understand why. But he knew this would be the moment of his revelation. The CEO, an older man with a sharp mind and a colder heart, stood beside him, unaware of the storm about to unfold. As the evening wore on, Thomas felt his moment approach. He had spent years observing, waiting for the right time to reveal his true identity. And now, it was time. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, taking the microphone from the host. The room went silent, and all eyes turned to him. Thomas's voice echoed through the hall, clear and commanding. "You saw me as just another worker, insignificant, unworthy of attention. But like all great kings, my power has always been in what I've concealed. You've never known the truth, but now I reveal it. I am the heir to a fortune you never knew existed, the master of empires hidden in plain sight. I have watched, waited, and now I am here to reshape everything." The room fell into stunned silence. The CEO, the directors, and everyone who had ever belittled him stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Thomas's words had shattered their perceptions, leaving them grasping for understanding. In that moment, they realized they had been in the presence of greatness all along, and they had never seen it. The truth about Thomas was finally revealed. He was the son of the factory's founder, a man who had mysteriously disappeared years ago, leaving behind a hidden empire. For years, Thomas had played the part of the humble, invisible worker, observing, learning, and waiting. Now, with a single revelation, he had taken control of his destiny. And just as quickly as the shock had set in, applause erupted throughout the room. But it was not for his wealth or status. It was for the power he had quietly wielded, for the transformation he had undergone, and for the lesson he had taught them all. True strength comes not from being seen, but from mastering the art of the unseen. The room, once filled with whispers of doubt, now buzzed with admiration. Thomas had shown them all what it meant to be a king, hidden, silent, and all-powerful. This expanded version of the story delves deeper into Thomas's transformation, offering more details about his actions and thoughts as he evolves from a humble, ignored worker into a powerful and mysterious figure. The story is now longer and more detailed, providing a richer experience for your narration. In a distant city, nestled between towering mountains and endless plains, there lived a man named Thomas. His home, small and worn out, was tucked away on the outskirts, far from the bustling heart of the city. While the tall skyscrapers and neon lights of the city center dazzled others, Thomas's world was muted, filled with shades of gray and an overwhelming sense of solitude. He had no friends, no family who came to visit. His existence was a quiet struggle that he never voiced. Every day, his life unfolded in an endless cycle of work, silence, and a deep sense of quiet resignation. Yet beneath the surface of this monotonous routine, Thomas had always felt something stirring within him, something hidden, something powerful, waiting to awaken. At the factory where Thomas worked, he was practically invisible. His tasks were simple, repetitive, and essential, but he performed them with an efficiency that went unnoticed by his colleagues. They were a younger, more vibrant group of workers, and they saw him as a relic of a time long past. Their eyes never lingered on him. Their words, when spoken, were dismissive and cold. They laughed at him behind his back, mocking his humble appearance, his tired eyes, and the way he shuffled through life, as though he were resigned to the shadows. Thomas had never reacted to their scorn, not once. His silence was his armor, the only way he knew how to survive. He had accepted his fate long ago. He was destined to be overlooked and forgotten. But within him, beneath the surface, there was a growing sense that his life was meant for something greater. He simply didn't know what that was yet. One evening, after another long and exhausting day at the factory, Thomas found himself needing an escape from the oppressive weight of his thoughts. The usual routine of returning home to his empty house and sitting in silence was no longer enough to numb the emptiness he felt. He needed to break free, even if only for a little while. He had no clear destination in mind. He simply began walking through the streets of the city. The night air was crisp, and the quiet streets offered him a sense of comfort. There were no distractions, no voices calling out to him, no people to judge him. It was just the sound of his footsteps and the occasional rustling of the wind. His wandering eventually brought him to the edge of the city, where an old, forgotten bookstore stood. Its windows were covered in layers of dust. The paint on its sign faded and peeling. But something about the place beckoned him. Thomas hesitated for a moment, but then pushed open the creaky door. The smell of old paper and leather filled the air, making him feel as though he had stepped into a different world. Inside, the bookstore was dimly lit, with shelves overflowing with books that seemed to have been untouched for years. There was a quiet, almost sacred atmosphere in the space, and despite its age and disrepair, the place felt alive with history. As Thomas slowly wandered through the narrow aisles, his eyes fell upon a leather-bound book that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. It was a book that stood out from the others, its golden letters shimmering with an aura of mystery. The title, The Hidden Empire, intrigued him, and he felt a strange pull toward it. Without thinking, he reached out and picked it up. As he opened the book, The pages felt smooth against his fingertips. The words on the first few pages were filled with power, with mystery, and with a sense of destiny. It spoke of empires built in secret, of rulers who operated from the shadows, and of power that was never seen by the world, but felt by everyone. Thomas couldn't tear his eyes away. It was a passage near the beginning that truly caught his attention. The words seemed to speak directly to him. True power is not revealed in the light. Those who master the shadows are the ones who shape the world around them without anyone ever knowing. As he read those words, something inside him clicked. For the first time in years, Thomas felt a stirring within him, a sense that something far greater than what he had ever imagined was waiting to awaken. The book seemed to whisper to him, urging him to embrace what lay hidden deep within. It was as if the story he was reading was not just some tale of a faraway ruler, but a reflection of his own life. The following days were different. Thomas, now filled with the knowledge from the book, began to see the world through new eyes. He saw the way people overlooked him, ignored him, and dismissed him as insignificant. He realized that his invisibility was not a weakness, but a power. If he could remain unseen, undetected, he could manipulate the forces around him without anyone knowing. In a world where attention was everything, the truly powerful were the ones who remained hidden in the shadows. Thomas began to experiment with this newfound perspective. He started at the factory, where his co-workers barely noticed him. He would subtly influence conversations, guiding people's thoughts and opinions without them even realizing it. He learned to listen carefully, to observe everything, to find the cracks in people's behaviors where he could insert his influence. Slowly but surely, he began to alter the course of events around him, moving like a shadow through the fabric of the factory's daily routine. He didn't have to speak loudly or even make his presence known. He simply guided the flow of things, directing outcomes without anyone noticing. In the weeks that followed, Thomas's subtle manipulations began to bear fruit. People who had once mocked him were now seeking his advice, though they couldn't understand why they trusted him. It wasn't just his quiet presence. It was the way his words seemed to always be exactly what they needed to hear. His co-workers began to see him in a different light, though they couldn't quite place why. But Thomas knew why. He had become the master of the invisible forces that governed their lives. Then one evening, a rare opportunity presented itself. The factory was in the middle of a high-stakes business deal, and the pressure was mounting. John, one of the company's directors, was in a panic. He was sweating, his face pale with the anxiety of the situation. Desperation clung to him like a second skin. Thomas, who had been observing quietly from the sidelines, saw his chance. John's voice cracked as he asked for help, but he wasn't really looking for assistance. He was simply looking for someone to blame if things went wrong. Thomas, sensing the weakness in John's desperation, stepped forward. But instead of offering help outright, Thomas merely asked the right questions, the questions that pushed John to reveal more than he intended. With each word, Thomas subtly guided the conversation, planting ideas in John's mind. Within minutes, John was unknowingly spilling confidential details, thinking he was simply confiding in a trusted employee. This was Thomas's moment of true power. It wasn't about brute force or loud authority. It was about knowing the right things to say, the right moments to act, and how to manipulate a situation to his advantage without anyone ever suspecting. And just like that, Thomas had acquired critical information that would allow him to steer the course of the company's decisions without anyone realizing he had done so. The next few weeks passed with Thomas quietly shaping the outcome of every situation he was involved in. He was becoming a hidden force in the factory, the silent hand guiding every decision. But he wasn't just influencing the factory's operations. He was also beginning to change the way he saw himself. He wasn't the weak, insignificant worker anymore. He was the master of his own fate, controlling his destiny from the shadows, pulling the strings without anyone realizing it. The turning point came when the company held a grand celebration to commemorate its success. The city's elite were all in attendance, the wealthiest, most powerful individuals in the business world. Thomas had never been one for attention, but tonight was different. As the CEO, a powerful man named Harold, stood before the guests, Thomas knew it was time to reveal himself. The moment had arrived. Stepping forward, Thomas took the microphone from Harold without asking. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. For a moment, Thomas simply stood there, letting the tension build. Then, in a voice that was calm but carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories, he spoke. "For years, I have been your invisible worker, the man you ignored, the one you mocked. But I have always been more than you realized. I am not just a factory worker. I am the heir to a fortune you never knew existed, the hidden king of an empire built in secret. You never saw me, but I have been watching all of you, and now I will reshape everything." The room went silent as the truth settled over them. For the first time, they understood the gravity of his words. The CEO's face went pale, and the other directors were speechless. It was as though the world had suddenly shifted beneath their feet. Thomas wasn't just a worker, he was the rightful ruler of the empire, the one they had overlooked and underestimated. And with that single revelation, Thomas took control of his life, his future, and the destiny that had always been his, hidden in plain sight. The world would never see him the same way again.